Welcome to Cartoonist Kayfabe. My name is Ed Piskor.
I'm Jim Rugg.
Geof Darrow has joined us today, and we're going to be taking a look at one of his masterpiece comics that he did in tandem with Frank Miller. Hardboiled is under the microscope today. Geof, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me back. I know I'm a favorite amongst your insomniac. They put on my interview and that they sleep like they've never slept before.
That is not true. But what is true is that most of, if not damn near 99% of your comics career has been involved with Dark Horse Comics pretty much from the beginning. And Jimmy, what are we looking at here?
Yeah, I brought these. This is a Dark Horse Insider. I love this stuff because it's sort of the ephemera of comics retail past. You know, Dark Horse and other indie publishers would send this stuff out, and it would let Comic Shop know, what's coming up. And this one is kind of interesting. This is July 1990, so promoting Hardboiled's release. There's one of these sitting on eBay for $150, and I don't really understand why, because if you look under it, and it's just, it's newsprint, 8 pages. Yeah. If you look under it, this is from 1989. So this is a preview of Dark Horse's plans coming out in 1989. And this must be the first appearance of Hardboiled, is my guess.
And that's the very first drawing I did of him.
Wow. That's why I pulled this out.
And this is kind of, I'm thinking, what should I? God, that's a horrible drawing. But as I look at it, God damn, the folds are so horrible. But as I look at it, I wanted him to kind of look like a little bit like Bronson and a little bit like Bruce Willis. I think I didn't capture either one of them. But,
Geof, I always thought that you were some lone Frenchman who's lives next door to Mobius or something, and it's things like this. In his first major American publication, I'm starting to feel more justified in like all of my young thoughts about who Geof Darrow may be, the elusive Geof Darrow, because it would be like language like that would suggest that you're from some foreign land or something.
Well, I'd already had something printed in the States. It was Heavy Metal printed one of my stories from it was printed in Metal Hurlant in around 84 or 85, something like that.
No, we're gonna have to search that one out, Jimmy. We're gonna have to go through our bins and see if we have that. Is it Bourbon Threat or no? It's before that.
No, yeah, it's Bourbon Threat. Yeah. And it's the color's different, and it was when it was printed. Because that story was a 4-page story, and I had a friend that I talked to, a friend named Jim Stenstrom, who was a writer. He worked with worked for Warren, wrote a lot of Warren series, and he broke it down because Pacific Comics wanted to print it before they went out of business, and he took it and he just cut up the pages and turned them into like a 10 or 14-page story. But that first story I ever did was like 4 pages. There must have been 20 panels on a page. The pages were enormous. They were just huge.
I always wanted to do this right here. Have 2 copies of Hardboiled 1 so that we could actually complete the image.
Yeah, it's a sweet image.
It's the back cover for the first ish.
I drew that in France. I remember exactly where it was. I was drawing it. I'd drawn it, and I thought, but the best part I thought of it was the name of the car, and Dark Horse wanted me to change it.
It says Jesus Chrysler.
Jesus Chrysler. I thought, that's not, I'm breaking my arm, pat myself on the back. I thought, that's funny. And they called me, can we change the name of the car? I said, no. And they said, well, because, there are people down there, might be stores down south that won't be happy with that. I said, no, it's a good gag. And they're going, it's not that good a gag.
You know what? I just literally saw this yesterday on, I think it was on Twitter, might have been Instagram. Somebody had posted a picture, and I can't remember the comic, so the story's going to fall a little bit flat, but it was from the maybe late 90s, and somebody's like, oh, I wish I would have thought of that. It was a Jesus Chrysler reference. Like, you could see the logo on the car, somebody's head's being slammed into a car, and they're like, yeah, Geof Darrow thought of it several years before this. And I can't remember the comic, which is maybe better. I don't need to take a shot, but it was really funny because literally yesterday I saw somebody else who also, Geof, thinks that's a great idea because they swiped it from you.
See, now, that cover Hardboiled, but go back to that. Now, I'm going to show you something.
Yes, please.
Because I had done a logo for it. And this is the way the cover, I wanted the cover to be. And it was funny because I sent it in, and I never heard from Frank, which I guess sort of told me that, it's not a good idea, because he had his brother do the logo. But it was going to be this.
Mm.
And then in real small at the bottom, I still have with the figures. So they're going to be really tiny at the bottom.
Right. That's sexy.
And I thought that was funny. And I did it in color. And I mean, it's Frank Miller, so I'm not going to, he knows more than I do. So
I remember seeing that logo in places very, very, very early on, like probably a black and white ad in one of those Dark Horse promos. And I think it was Nixon leaning up against it or standing in front of it or whatever, but it was that tall vertical logo you just held up. That's fascinating that's your logo.
But I was like with Frank, it was like, I'm not going to, as it is.
What I'd like to see is I'd like to see a new edition of Big Damn Hardboiled, and let's get that logo out for a new cover of that, and we'll all be happy.
Well, no, I liked it. I just, I didn't need it to be that.
Who was Frank Miller's brother? Like I know that he
Stephen Miller. Yeah, he did a lot of Frank. I think he did the
Sin City.
The splatter thing. That's him, and he's done most of Frank's logos. Yeah.
Yeah. Was he involved in fandom? And is he a graphic designer? Like how does?
Not that I know, and I don't remember.
Because this is good stuff, has good kerning and all that stuff. It's very professional.
It's also really good stuff in the sense of put this on a wall next to a bunch of comics, and this one is going to pop off.
Yeah.
It's very stands out, and that's what I always think you want in a cover. So it definitely pops off of the wall.
Yeah, I never thought to this day, I don't think I'm good at covers. But that was the first one where I heard the whole thing of. It won't fit in my box.
Right.
So I didn't buy it.
Yeah, which persists to this day to some extent. Some stores for sure. And the colors. How you say it? Claude Legris?
Yeah. Who was the wife at the time? She was the wife of this really amazing artist named Christian Rossi. Really good. He worked with Mobius. He did some comics that bande dessinée that Jean wrote. He works to this day. Really, really amazing.
And you were goodly enough to send us a bunch of script pages from the first 2 issues of Hardboiled, and pretty spare scripts, pretty straightforward. Definitely not talking about like all the crazy stuff that we get to see in here.
So, these first 2 pages were added afterwards. This is the first page. That page with him, that's the first page I ever did. And then in fact, there's a self-portrait of me on there. That's me. And there's Betty Page, which I thought was, and
This is a page that I copied on a giant poster board.
Oh my God.
And I don't have it. It hurts me to know that I don't have it anywhere, that I could see like how bad my copy would be. But how on earth could you get this as your first page and not make it your first page?
Yeah.
Like even a cover, like it's the one of the most striking images in comics I've ever seen. And if you opened a book and saw that, I mean, you have to go home with it.
You know why?
Let's hear it.
Just go back to the first page. First panel. The reason is right there on the lower right-hand corner. That robot dog. Frank, I kept drawing. I had a bulldog at the time, and I would just draw him. If I wanted to fill up some space, I'd put a bulldog in there. Because he's sitting there, and I know I'd draw him. And it bothered Frank, and he said to me, well, how come there's so many bulldogs in this thing? Frank, bulldog is the dog of the future. And it bothered him. It's like, that thing where that threshold of believability. And he said, well, I've got to explain why these dogs are there. And so he said, they became, later on you see it, they become like cameras, like CC cameras. And so they were following him around so much. So we have to let people know that they're robot dogs. And so he added these 2 pages to explain that dog. And now, is there, well, there's no, because I can't see, I don't have the comic with me. I didn't have any like exhaust coming out of the dog's butt.
No fumes.
That would have been a really nice
fumes,
choice.
No piles.
It would have worked.
I've matured. I do that more now. So that's how my art has progressed. I now methane has become an important part of my process.
You could imagine these 2 pages happening as like pages, I don't know, 4 and 5, let's say. Like if we had gone this page and a 2-page spread and then come to this, it seems like that would have worked. You would have got sucked right into this action, and then you would have heard, oh boy, we've got a problem with this guy, and it would have given us some context there. But it's just such a, man, I love old splash pages.
And on top of it, that I had done it. I finally finished the first issue, and now I got to add 2 pages. Like, oh man, you're killing me here. Anyway,
do you remember how long it took you to do each issue?
No.
Did they come out annually?
Oh, no. The first 2 came out pretty close to each other. It's between the second and the third one, which Frank addresses. You'll see on the cover of the third one. But I never thought I was slow. I was working at a European pace. And generally, they did like 1 book a year.
Right.
I think they had 2 of them in the can before because they came out, like I said, fairly recently. But these were the first couple pages because I was working on this thing, and I wouldn't show Frank anything because I thought, I kept thinking once he sees it, he's gonna go, well, maybe this isn't a good idea, because we had talked about doing other projects together, and
what a reveal this would have been if you're Frank Miller and you suddenly get your batch of pages. And this is what you're looking at. Like, I can imagine doing like backflips or something whenever you would see these.
The first 3 or 4 pages is what I gave him in pencil. And he was at this point because he decided he didn't want to do it for DC or Marvel, and so he was actually paying me.
I was going to ask about the business model of this and how you sustained yourself.
And he was going to, I don't remember how much he was paying me a month, but at one point they go, we got to look, because I wasn't producing fast enough for him. And I can understand, because I mean, he was doing fine, but he was not a rich man, and paying me, I don't know how much it was, maybe $1,000 a month or something, maybe 2,000. But I think it took me I think in that first month I did 10 pages, maybe.
That's a lot.
It doesn't sound bad at all.
Yeah, certainly for this style.
Yeah, but I was just trying to figure it out. I mean, I look at this stuff and it makes me cringe, because it's just, I didn't know I still don't. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I mean, and then you go back to that car thing, that previous page with that thing. I look at it and go, oh God, this is wrong and that is wrong. The only thing I'm still kind of happy with is the fire escape. That thing is fucking crazy to draw. Fire escape is just the worst, man.
Everybody's sitting at home watching this going, just the fire escape? That's the only thing that's crazy to draw?
No, because it had to be real. The rest is all just made up. So, but that was real. But I mean, it's probably, I don't know. I wonder if people, because I mean, I have a tendency to bury the action, because I mean, he can barely see him in there,
right?
Which I kind of like, but and it bothers me, because then I get that it really bothers when people call me, "Where's Waldo?"
Yeah,
I can remember.
But I understand it, but I just don't like it.
I look at this and I think, when I see this guy's being run over and like his insides are spraying out, it's almost like Bill Elder. It's the chicken fat, because like I bought this off the stand. Like whenever it came out, I bought it, and I had never seen anything like it. So I spent so much time of like open up going back through each page and just pouring over the pages, and they would reward it. And it was kind of that Will Elder esque thing of like, I'm going to put fun stuff everywhere on this page. So if you want to spend half an hour looking at it, you're going to get rewarded for it. It's just that it's a little bit, it's a little different tone than Will Elder.
Sure. Yeah, it's not like a little mouse running with a piece of cheese.
But it has that level of detail of like, yeah, just study this thing and really enjoy the detail work that you put into it. And I think this sums up that kind of detail really well. But
I thought it was funny.
The excess is so over the top. The black blood was something that I would go on to love in Outlaw comics. Mm-hmm. It's very effective as blood, as a graphic element. But this might have been the first place that I really saw that level of like black blood just sprayed everywhere.
Well, see, I got it from Akira because I wanted to have blood, and I wanted to do the spray, and I really wanted it to be red. And Claude Legree at the time was pregnant, and she was coloring it, and she said, if I do it so it is blood, it makes me sick to my stomach. So I was gonna, after that, I started filling it in, making it black. I was just drawing it like in shapes and stuff.
It's so hard to picture it red.
I know what you mean.
Well, but we did it. We did do it on the Dave Stewart do it, and I we disagree. I know you like the color. I like the color of the Dave Stewart one. This one, there's parts of it. I mean, because I didn't have any say on the color really.
Right.
Because I was in Los Angeles and she was in Paris, and she had done this whole first issue before I saw it, and it was all blue line, and those you have to do the whole thing over, and I didn't have the heart to say, no, this isn't what I want.
Right. The thing about the black blood, though, is that because there's not lighting on everything else, your eye draws right to it. Certainly when you see it in black and white. So I could see how that could be a thing that you would want to see made red for the gestalt of the whole page. But Geof, one of the big revelations, getting to know you and getting to know your process a little bit better, is that for each page of comics, there's at least two pieces of original art. There is the pencils, and there are independent inks that are done on a separate piece of paper. So you're, in effect, drawing these pages twice. And was that the same process for this thing?
Yeah. I think the inking, because I don't think it looks. I like looking at the pencil drawings when I'm holding them in my hands, but then when I see them printed, I'm not convinced. And I've told this story. I thought, well, maybe I'd be faster if I did, because I know Frank Quietly, that's how he does it.
Yeah.
And maybe I can do that. That way, I can turn more stuff out. And I actually asked my colorist at the time, Peter Doherty. He said, no, it wouldn't work. It wouldn't work for you. And so I gave up. Well, that must mean that my pencils don't look very good.
On this book, at some point, didn't you do each panel on its own page?
They're all, especially as it gets on, it gets crazier, because every panel was a separate sheet of paper.
And what was the purpose of that?
Look at the size. You see it?
Right, it's a little squatter, a little smaller.
Yeah. God, that's a horrible drawing. That explosions. But I think that's not too bad, because that whole thing, that whole orgy thing, none of this stuff is in the script.
You're right.
I just like the whole idea of the horribleness of what's going on, and no one seems concerned. Because when I read it, and Frank said that he's like a tax collector, and that's the most important thing, is collecting money, not that this horrible, Texas Chainsaw Marathon sex orgies going on.
That's funny to think about. In a lot of ways, maybe the book's more relevant today than ever. Did Frank, once he saw some pages, did he call? Did you guys have a conversation? Was he like,
well, I'm
going to have to adjust the script?
I showed it to him and Lynn, and I remember it was so sweet, because they called me back and they were still thinking and talking about him. And they said it just wasn't what we expected at all. And but he did go back, and he told me later, because he said he would like pace around the room. He goes, what am I going to do?
It's some of my favorite collaboration with Miller has that quality, because I think Elektra Assassin has some of that quality where, and Miller in interviews would talk about like rewriting that once the art would come in, and I feel like this book has that similar process. it's like, here's the concept, and then you get the art back, and Miller has to then like go back through it and rethink it. And in a way, I think it's the apex of the Marvel method, where like you really are make words that work on art of this power.
Right.
Well, yeah, because I mean, and Frank, gosh, he was so patient with me, because I mean, we'd always have this thing. He was always trying to get me to go faster, and I'm just, well, you'll make more money, but I couldn't, I just couldn't do it.
Were you in France?
No, I was in Los Angeles. I moved back, and we had been friends, and maybe excuse me if I told you this story, but I never talked. I never asked him to write anything because I didn't think I was not Dave Gibbons. I'm not obviously John Romita Jr. Any of those guys, and I'm not of that level. And he asked me one day. I remember we were standing in the corner right near the because he used to live downtown in a loft in Los Angeles near Little Tokyo. I was standing in the corner, and he just said, "Would you ever draw something written by somebody else?" And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Would you do something that I would write?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "What do you want to do?" "Something with a lot of action." That's what I said. Like I brought this up before, he came up with a few different things that were related to Marvel, and there was actually a kind of a version of Superman that he talked about doing that he was going to do with Steve Gerber, and it was going to be called, I think it was called Soldier, and it was like Superman told, like if that actually happened, but then Steve, I don't know, he was involved in that whole Howard the Duck lawsuit thing, and it was just hard to get him to nail it down, and so we gave up on that.
Geof,
Dark Horse describes it as hard-boiled is reality through the eyes of a psychotic cyborg. So I like to imagine psychotic cyborg came into your discussions with Frank early on.
No, he was supposed to be a human being. And when Frank saw that page, especially that page where he's covered in the barbed wire and he's got the broken fingers, he's got the glass sticking out of him, and he said, "There's no way a human being could survive that." And right, it's a comic book. And I'd been watching these John Woo. I was very influenced by John Woo's A Better Tomorrow and The Killer. And in those movies, guys were always getting shot to pieces, and they'd still at the end walk away and let's go have a beer. They got 7 bullets in them, and that's the kind of guy I'm going to draw.
I mean, this is the average wrestling deathmatch result here, man. We see human beings go through this pretty regularly. Every once and again, man. Jason Cage comes to mind, man. Where he gets a artery snipped or something, and then has to get life flighted. But it happens.
I was accused by once of that gun, his gun being ripped off from Blade Runner, and it really bothered me. And I went and looked at it and I go, no, it's not. Because I mean, I only saw Blade Runner once.
Yeah.
But actually, that gun, my idea came from it was a Harlan Ellison Outer Limits episode.
Oh, I know the one.
I think it was called Soldier.
Yeah.
And he had this gun that no matter how you took it apart, it was still a weapon. And I drew that thing so it's a shotgun, and it's an automatic, and it's got a revolver, and it's got a little bayonet in it. But anyway.
That's the other thing, man. Like when we talk about the fantasy of making the Cartoonist trading cards, and on the back having a matrix of like all the attributes that goes into cartooning, and you could have various levels of any of those things and become like, master cartoonist. Your design sense is incredibly high. Like, look at this ambulance, character designs, technology. Like, easily imagine the Wachowskis seeing this and saying, like, Let's.
Frank, as well, explain it. What is this machine? Why is it got? And I go, look, it's got a protein delivery. The babies were protein, and they'd all be turned into, in my mind, into some kind of fluid that was being injected into him. And then you had like candy, and I think there's pop and there's soda.
Some Pepsis and shit.
And and then they had these little. Is there like a little?
The Little Mermaids with the Popeye tattoo.
Okay, I was gonna say, I know I put Popeye in there somewhere.
Yeah.
Did anybody push back with having like recognizable logos like Coca-Cola and Pepsi? Did any of the editors or Dark Horse or Frank have worries about that?
No, I
McDonald's.
never. In fact, to this day, I never thought of it. I don't do it now, but back then,
That's the other piece to the matrix of the Geof Darrow gestalt is incredible letterer. Incredible lettering, man. The facades of his buildings have great signage in perspective, fluorescent lights,
just
kitschy logos.
it's just perspective. It's all just observation and
Good graffiti. I was thinking early on here, seeing shades of like Stephen Platt must have been a fan of this book.
Oh, sure.
You know, all the shell casings
Absolutely.
flying through the air, and then I gotta love the Willeford reference.
That's his,
You know, Charles Willeford, the pulp crime writer, a great writer for anybody that likes crime fiction and hasn't read him. Is that something that you and Frank would talk about?
yeah. Yeah, we both read the Hoke Mosley books. Have you read those?
Yes.
And, so we both really liked him, and so Frank, that he just put that in there because we both liked him. I was happy. I was surprised. I mean, I don't know if you know, but he supposedly wrote one last Hoke story. Willeford did. Do you know this story?
No.
If you read them, they're pretty depressing detective stories. And supposedly the last one, and his wife has never let it be printed. The last one, supposedly, the character goes out and he kills his wife and his kids.
oh man.
Loses it.
Wow.
Because I mean, if you look at it, the other ones, because his life, the character in that is in such a downward spiral that it kind of. But God, I just don't want to think about. And I really like the character. If you haven't read them, they're really funny. And they made one of them into a movie with Alec Baldwin and
Fred Ward.
Fred Ward, Miami Blues.
Yeah, I think that's the first one in the series, the first book in that series. I think it's Sideswipe is maybe a little bit later in that series. Yeah. One of the strangest structures I've ever read in a book, and I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but go read these books. Like, they're very, very fun.
They're like nothing else you've known. Yeah. Like all this stuff, like in this page here, that was all stuff that I think that, because Frank said to me, you've put all these things that worth them. Like pointy objects going into people's eyes. And,
So are your characters based on? Do you have somebody in mind when you're drawing various people?
Like I said, when I was drawing him originally, I thought of Charles Bronson, but I couldn't draw him, and then I like Bruce Willis, but I still couldn't draw him.
Sure.
I think he looks different all the time, but I don't know what the hell I'm doing.
There are peripheral characters that look like people, and I guess I'll point them out, and I'll see if anything comes to mind as we do.
Such a horrific moment. It's so tragic. There's so much cartoon in this over the top violence, and then you get a panel like this, and it's heartbreaking.
Sure. But look at this, man.
That whole building, the architecture is because I was living in LA, and it discovered, I think from the Batman movie, they mentioned it, and some guys, I think Dave Stevens as well. There was a guy named Hugh Ferris who was an architectural designer, artist from the 30s, and there's a book, and this guy did these amazing pencil drawings of buildings that look like Metropolis, and that had a big influence on me. And if you can find this guy's stuff, he's just so fantastic. And of course, he never made any of his buildings, but gosh.
Yeah, amazing Art Deco energy here, man. And
some of them are based on old radios, like that whole facade below the Willeford. That's like the front of an old Bakelite radio, I think.
Would this be those old Sears catalogs manifesting from reference into your work?
Chronicle Books would put out things, and they had one that was on radios. They'd put like Art Deco, the buildings of Tropical Deco was one of them. It's like in Miami, they have a lot of those buildings still. And I was looking at those, and they came out with one that was just radios. And I looked at that a lot because there's all these just dials, and some could be towers. This is why I'm really happy, because God, I didn't want to have to fucking draw that gurney. So I'll just draw the wheel.
Right. But would something as incidental as the wheel be one piece of paper, or would it be like, say, maybe three panels?
All those were separate sheets of paper. I think I still have the wheel one, because I sold a bunch of them. Mignola would laugh about it, because I had them all in a hefty bag, and I brought them to San Diego, And he just laughed because he brings out his garbage bag and he pours these drawings out on the table. I was selling them for like $30 a piece or $40.50 at them.
Makes
I
me
used
want
to buy like dynasties.
the hard-boiled artist edition.
People will bring them to me every once in a while. Oh, well, I haven't seen this in years. I still have some of the pencil drawings.
That's awesome.
That's damn near a Sentinel from the Matrix.
Yeah,
that's probably the image that sold them.
Yeah, it's not hard to turn this into a nightmare. Imagine staring at a machine like that working on you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh. If all I saw was this page, I would think, Geof, that you had gone through some horrible medical experiences growing up of just staring up into that bright light and seeing all these sharp metal objects pointed at you. Was there ever talk of Lynn Varley coloring this? You mentioned her and Frank looking at this.
No, because she was probably as slow as I was. I know if Electra Assassin was late, it was because she was painting those things. Each one was literally a painting on those blue lines.
We always hear, Frank Miller after doing Electra Lives Again was like not doing that style anymore.
Yeah,
and now it makes me think Lynn Varley had the same reaction.
Yeah, because we would sit there and we'd talk about stuff and go, well, this and Line Clear and this and that. And it was just,
This thing right here might be one of the more disturbing things to me also, because it's like, is it a blood pressure cuff kind of gimmick on there, man? Is it full of air? Is it blasting or is it sucking?
It's a catheter.
Oh my goodness.
Because I'm thinking they've been operating on it so long, he's going to have to pee. That kind of stuff always bothered Frank, because I was fairly scatological. It really bugged me. I had an answering machine. There were answering machines in those days. And I had one on there, and I had a message on there that they left a message: if you don't erase that tape, we will never call you again. I referred to hi, this is Geof Darrow. This is Geof Darrow. I'm doing fine. My stream this morning was fairly strong, and I had a strong, a fine movement. I'm getting enough fiber. Please leave your message in that.
How about some parallels between this kind of obscenity and this one? Because you see both times it's almost this crowd around just the human body and the exploitation of that body. I don't know if you thought about that at all making it, but flipping through it now, I see so many of those, it's a repetition of that theme.
Well,
just in a way how cheap the humans are.
Stuff to him, and then people are eating, and there's guys looking at magazines, the guy's picking his nose, there's this horrible shit going on.
Yeah, it's the entertainment.
To this day, I see that so much horrible stuff, and it doesn't seem to bother people. And I keep doing it over and over. It's like people seem oblivious to some of the mini horrors that are going around in the world. And this thing, there's a movie called Barbed Wire, and the Dark Horse. It was based on that Dark Horse comic, and there's some scene in there that they wanted to use this machine, and they were going to pay me to use the drawing. I said, sure, what the hell,
Put Pamela Anderson in that gimmick?
Yeah. Well, but the thing is, the first contract they sent to me, it was like they owned the comic book.
Yeah,
they
just get the fuck out of here.
Drawing. And I said, no, fuck no.
Yeah, fuck that shit, man.
And but they used it. They just paid me. I signed no paper. They just used it, and I got a credit on it, and I got paid. For me, it was a lot of money. And, yeah.
Geof, another great strength of your artwork and cartooning, we see it here in this crowd shot, and certainly in the new Shaolin Cowboy when you have these voluminous amounts of people, is you never are a victim of same face syndrome. All your people look much different, and is that just drawing from your head and you're just changing proportions, or are there any secret tricks to that?
No, just observation, and every once in a while, I watch a movie, I go, oh wow, that's a nose I haven't seen before. Ooh, because I'm always afraid I'm drawing the same face.
Yeah.
I can't.
It never happens.
When I look at Shaolin Cowboy, I go, he doesn't look the same from panel to panel. I've never really, even when they were doing that animation film in Japan, they they drew him to look a certain way that, well, yeah, that's good because I wouldn't have figured it out. If you go back like that one page, like there's one page in there, that page, the one with the cables, I was so relieved because I think I drew that in like, half a day. And I was like, wow, I actually got a page done. Little hand with and I get to draw gauges and I get to draw these wires. And oh, gosh, that was fun.
Our videos are brought to you by the comic books that we make in stores now. Hulk Grand Design just recently released. What else do you got coming
Street
soon?
Angel. Street Angel Princess of Poverty is my next book coming out later this spring. You can pre-order that now from Image Comics. There's also Street Angel Deadly Squirrel Live. Together, those books will comprise the complete Street Angel library at this point. So for all you completists out there that want all the Street Angel, add Street Angel Princess of Poverty to your list. And The Plain Janes, first young adult graphic novel available wherever graphic novels and books are bought and sold. And you can join me on patreon.com/JimRugg to see lots more of my work, originals, download out-of-print zines and mini comics, and see what I am working on next.
Big announcement coming soon. I am chomping at the bit, and some of you know what it is because you have the Google fingers, but I just need things to be a little bit more put together, a little bit more tight before I speak about it. Big news coming soon. Can't wait to tell you about that. But right now, Red Room Crypto Killers issue 1 and 2 are being offered to your local comic shops. So go ahead and put in those pre-orders. Also, go to your local comic shop, and we have put together an incentive program with the Red Room issues. It is a limited time offer. Your shop knows what it is, but you have a chance of getting some of the Red Room variant covers that you did not get. We sat on a little surplus of them because just when you hit the button to print something, there's a little overprinting. So these comics cannot be sold in a traditional way. It has to be done in this other kind of way. Your shop is familiar with doing it. They do it with Image Comics fairly regularly, and we have this surplus stock that is very, very limited. Go to your shop. There are 2 or 3 different plans that your shop can participate in to get these Red Room comics. But grab the new Crypto Killers issues. It is the 10-year anniversary of Hip Hop Family Tree. 4 volumes of that, 3 volumes of X-Men Grand Design. There's WYSIWYG. I'm serializing the new Red Room stuff on my Patreon. And the Cartoonist Kayfabe channel has a Patreon account, and the King Kayfabers get all of our videos before anybody else. Mitigates the Kayfabe effect. Makes it possible for you to get the comics before anybody else, and that aftermarket can get pretty pricey. Now that we are done paying the bills, let's get back to the video. Would the color on the page like this bug you? Because it is so
I
brown.
like this. I like the one on the left-hand side. No, she did some really nice work. It just wasn't. I think it was the blood thing that bothered me the most.
Right.
That's so interesting. I had a conversation yesterday at a signing. Someone came up and they're like, how does that go when you talk to Brian Boland about the different colors in Killing Joke? And we've had this conversation with, a few different artists. And, Jeff, now you're adding to the conversation of like these colors and recolors and trying to sort that out. And I was explaining, like, from my viewpoint, you can see validity in both of those approaches. It's not that one is terrible and one is great. It's more of like, what are you looking for? It's the little details of like, I want this to be a certain way. As opposed to like every single thing is wrong,
right?
And it's not like that usually.
There's a lot of bipolarity in the audience, and it shows up in our comments too. We're like, I think we were looking at the Ballin cover for Killing Joke and commending his use of reference with how he turned it into the Joker, and then in the ElfQuest 1 episode we did, commending Wendy Peeney for not using any reference on these cartoon faces, and people like, I don't know if it's Asperger's syndrome, I don't know where they're on the spectrum, but they're like, well, how can you like both?
Right.
And it's like, get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, I've had people ask me what my influences are, and I'll bring them up, and they're like Alex Toth and Hugo Pratt and Moby, and they go, well, you don't look anything like Hugo Pratt. I go, yeah, it doesn't. I mean, I like everything. See that where you got your finger on that, right below that drawing, right below that, because I was working on that page, and Dave Stevens came over and he wanted to ink that panel.
That's it. That's his motif, no doubt, man.
Well, it kind of, there was something about the drawing that he really liked, and he goes, "Can I ink that?" And I go, "Yeah, sure," but I thought, wow, he's slower than I am. So.
How big would this panel be?
Oh, I don't know. Gosh, probably twice up, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think, and I thought too, if he inks that panel, people are gonna go to this thing, and all of a sudden they're like, wading through the shit, and then suddenly there's this diamond in the middle of it.
One thing I always noticed in this issue is that whoever photographed this or scanned it or whatever, there is a hair that got printed on this girl's arm. A big, long fucking pubic hair is printed on the goddamn book. I don't know if it got caught between the layers, like if it's under the acetate of the black line art or something.
Well, I remember really like that, doing that thing in the middle there, because I got to draw these little action sequences.
That's Full John Woo.
Yeah, and like, I think he shoots some guy in the balls.
Yes.
I like that. I do that goofy little cartoon spiral with a hand grenade.
Right. I was going to comment on that. It's it's that cartoon language. It's a heck of a page.
Yeah, fantastic. Great color on there to separate the scenes. Geof, were you drawing with like felt tip pens at this time, like microns?
Yeah, I was drawing on. I don't know if they were microns. I can't remember. I was the other day trying to think of when I started using those things.
Yeah.
But
now we got Nixon and his old lady fucking in front of the kids.
Yeah. Well, they're not kids.
Right.
This panel reminds me of like you'd see Steranko do the Nick Fury, and it's like, oh, when we do the sex scene, can't show that. Got to just show the gun hanging over the chair.
In the holster.
It's like, here we're just showing everything. Gun and sex scene.
It's the 90s, baby. Gen X.
This is a really clever effect where you have like the two realities blending together. You know, the, I don't know, dream sequence or whatever, he's living in one space, but then like that panel itself is actually like transitioning into this, I guess, fantasy or, later time period. Really an interesting effect from a comic standpoint.
This is when I got my collection of porn at the time came in handy. So
she's a natural beauty.
Oh, and this is where I thought, oh, Frank, can we like have a, Give Me Liberty and Hardboiled? There's shared universe. Everybody's talking about universes and shared universes. So.
That would be that time for sure.
And I got to draw that hard thing of like people kissing in a comic. Oh, it's hard.
Yeah, man.
How did they do romance comics? Because it is impossible, and romance comics have this 25 panels of this.
Yeah, it's like you draw one face, and then you just put the eyes over here, and then that's like the shorthand.
That's funny. I was gonna say like there's one pose, and if you look at some of the Charles Burns stuff, where like he's like has his clip art file, like it's the same pose for that.
Yeah, it's exactly like. Same
I think I put people's names on this because I don't have the comic.
Here, let's see who you're talking smack on, man. Let's see who you want dead.
And
I hope I'm not getting in the camera too much here.
Yeah, no? I'm seeing Cat on one of them.
Oh.
Okay, too many names.
Mary.
No, then I guess I didn't, because it seems like something I would do. But if you look in that other panel, because like this thing really, Frank, because I got this dog. This is my first dog crapping in a comic book, right? That is, Wolverine's first appearance in Hulk. I think this was just as important as the first dog crapping. And this is when Frank decided we got to explain these dogs.
Right.
And I think he's got, I was really loved Paul Rubens, the Pee Wee Herman character. I put Pee Wee in there. Little girls got their Pee Wee Herman doll.
Oh, yeah, there it is, man. That would have been that era, too. My brother had that little pool toy. Would you do this lettering?
Yeah, I did all that lettering. You see, it was pretty crappy. That's all me.
This lettering is you?
Yeah, and that all. Anything is all in the artwork. All the lettering was done separately. By, I think John Workman did it. And there's my has a homage to Clutch Cargo, one of my favorite cartoons, and the Batman movie.
Right. Yeah. That gimmick would be in the Batman flick.
Because I always thought that balloon is still floating around because he just cuts it loose.
Right.
And it's still full of nerve gas. It's going to come down somewhere. Like, he doesn't give a shit. As long as it's not in Gotham City. It probably landed in Iowa or in Ohio, actually.
Some very profane, yeah, right. So just super profane signage is a Geof Darrow trope, man. And Love Canals is pretty good. The only way it could be better is if the colorist made the C, like like the sea in canals
right.
was
the light burnout.
lost illumination. Yeah.
And the Pup Boys, that one I like that one.
I love it all, man.
It's a California thing, and I have no idea that it's in California. They dropped these giant bridges, which is like the dumbest thing you can do. Because at the time, I mean, I was terrified of earthquakes. And I think one happened, and it was like that. The whole idea that they wouldn't give a shit anymore. They're just going to build these buildings, even if they're in a harsh earthquake. So.
Cover for issue 2 here.
There's a note back here in credits as marketing director Bob Schreck. And Bob Schreck I always think of as a longtime comics editor. Did you have any interaction with him at this time, Geof? For marketing or promotion or anything? Do you remember what that was?
Not really. I mean, I don't... Frank was, he was the guy. And I did a little... I remember we met with the guy from Rolling Stone. I think it's Gary Gilmore. Is that... He's a really famous writer, and his brother was, he wrote a book about his brother who was executed. I think it's Execution, maybe it's an Executioner song, but he was became a really famous writer. And he was the first guy to talk about Hardboiled, because I brought some pages with Frank, and I met with him, and I showed him to him, and he talked about it in Rolling Stone. So it was a kinetic harmonic. I think they printed on the back of one of them.
Yeah, it's in there somewhere.
He really pushed it.
Yeah, we'll find it. Who's
it's on issue 1, because if you get a Rolling Stone quote, like that would go that'd be the top quote.
Sure, but yeah.
But that was about it. I know that after the first issue came out, I was sitting I'd moved back to France at this point. And
for issue 2?
Yeah, and I came to visit, and I was at his house, and he got a call from Rolling Stone. They wanted to talk about Hardboiled because some comic store got closed down because a mother complained about the comic. And I remember Frank sitting there and just going, and I was kind of surprised that he didn't let me talk to him. They talked to him. But yeah, because in the stuff that they were complaining about was stuff that I had drawn that
Frank,
I didn't do too much. I mean, when that comic came out, I was in France. I had no idea how people reacted to it. It was kind of a coitus interruptus, because I'd done this comic, and I had no idea what people thought of it.
Frank was on such a crusade around probably this time when you guys were working on the comic. That probably added some fuel to the fire. And I'm trying to remember. There is a clip on YouTube that you can find right now. Dennis Kitchen is the guy in studio, and then there's this doctor who's fashions himself as almost like a modern day Frederick Wortham. It might be Larry King doing the interview or something. I think it is CNN. Dennis Kitchen is going back and forth with this doctor guy, and Frank does call in and talk. And this doctor guy is such on his high horse. Just such a fucking douchebag, talking about I read Pep comics and Archie comics and this kind of thing. I would like to say that now it is confirmed the guy is guilty. He is in prison because a part of the opioid epidemic shit. He's a Pennsylvania guy. He created a harem of destitute chicks, down and out chicks, fucking drugged them up and had almost like a cult. And this guy is on these old fucking shows with Dennis Kitchen. He's guilty, so this is no slander, libel, nothing. And he is doing time, fucking feeding chicks opiates, trying to create a harem. But don't read Hardboiled.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Oh man.
There's a dedication here in the front.
Yes.
Giant Big Wally.
Who is that?
I had 2 desert tortoises, and one of them was I called him Cadillac, and he was stolen. I kept him in the backyard, and he was stolen.
Oh, that
and
sucks.
The other one was called Big Wally, and as he got older, he got bigger. So I started calling him, or it was Big Wally. He got bigger, so I called him Giant Big Wally. And Frank said, "What? Why Big Wally? Why is he Giant Big Wally? Because he's bigger than that now. He's a giant now." And I think I always would shake his head. And Lynn would shake her head like, God, this guy, I don't know.
How big would a desert turtle?
They would get about, I mean, he wasn't that big,
Sweet.
yeah, big, and they were just really, and you had to have a license, and I got it from a guy that, because people would take them out of the desert, and they were disappearing, and they would take them to these people that raised them, and you could adopt one. So I adopted both of these, and I adopted one, and he'd go in there and he'd ask you questions about turtles and this and that, like it was like I was adopting a child, and he offered me a baby one because it just had some, and that was Giant Big Wally. So I think eventually we dedicated one to Lynn's cat.
I know that I was going to ask you about the turtle because I know that like sometimes homes come with them out there in California, and because there would be
it'll live for a while.
Yeah,
turtle.
There'll be these 100-year-old turtles that have like always been there. So it's like
they lived. He had my girlfriend, a girl I was going out with at the time. Her neighbor had one, and it lived under the house. And if you called its name, it would come out.
Wow. I saw turtles mating one time at the zoo.
Yeah, it's crazy noise.
They make some noise. Yeah.
Shocking. You can go down that rabbit hole.
Very vocal lovers.
Yeah. I think there's a very famous meme video of a turtle in a shoe that you can hear all those noises and things on the tubes. Jeff, this is madness right here. And explain to the people like what Frank Miller's contribution was to this bit. And what your contribution, your contribution is very visible here on the page. And it is the difference between when some Batman writer writes some simple gimmick and now the artist has to draw that.
Oh, I don't remember complete. I just remember I was just trying to impress Frank so much. And I didn't want to embarrass myself. And I thought if he said that there was like an accident, it couldn't just be like one car. Just like in the first one, there were like 3 guys dead at the beginning, and I turned it into, I don't know how many. Because it's just like, well, bigger is better. And so
these designs, how does something like this start out? Or is it the chassis of a Corvette and then you start adding curves?
No, I might have had some toy cars. And I just look at the curves, and I was looking at maybe motorcycles, and I think Lynn Varley's father had I don't know if he had a car dealership, but he had like a bunch of those they used to give out pamphlets when you go to a car dealership. They're beautiful. And then it would have like, paintings of the car and like the family with the car and the things you could do with the car. You could go camping, or you could go antique hunting and blah, blah, blah. And I looked at those things. And at this time, Batman had come out, and I was very impressed with the cars in Batman. And I didn't like modern cars because I think they all looked alike. And so his car looks like a big old Packard or something. And then he had this ambulance, which I just thought, or it's a police car.
Yes, a police on it.
I thought it'd be funny that there'd be like little cars on the side that were like lifeboats, and they would shoot off the side when there was a crime. So they just, it's a joke. It won't even fit under the bridge. If you look, it's going to hit that bridge. And I've seen that in Chicago. You'll see like semis, they'll say 10, 15-foot limit. And I just see the guys and you'll just see the front of the truck under the bridge and the back part just jammed into that bridge.
Can opener.
Oh, man.
There's something great about these kind of designs too, because I feel like that's what my friends and I would do like elementary school, long before we could draw well, but it was just combine cool stuff.
Totally.
Have your missile launchers on the top of it.
I mean, it's all just, I think if you have like something to run with, like anything, if you get a little toy car and you just take it and you extrapolate on it. You make the tires bigger, you make it longer, you make the hood shorter, or, it's just.
I love what you do with the sound effect for like the police siren. The letters going up and down. It's a really great visual for trying to emulate a siren like sound.
Totally.
That's a bit of Richard Corbin direction with sound that I probably picked up.
And I don't suppose you ever played Spy Hunter in the arcades, but that's what this kind of piece is right here. I mean, you remember that game?
I do, yeah.
I mean, Frank, that's in Frank's strip, and I was always thinking of those, those ninja things that they'd throw when they're running. So they're
Yeah,
chasing
caltrops or whatever.
They throw them out there, and those guys run around. Oh, 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 oh.
So, Cloud puts a lot of interesting coloring in terms of like shadows.
Yeah, that was done by her husband. This Christian, I mentioned he was married to an artist named Christian Rossi, and he did the shadows for her.
So interesting.
Yeah, it is. It's kind of, you get into that territory of like now you're drawing stuff as
Perspective.
colorist.
Yeah. It's like legit perspective. There's a way to do it right and a way to do it wrong. And Geof set up the perspective, so the colorist, you don't want to fuck it up.
Yeah, it sells that explosion really well.
No, Geof, like we talked with Brian Bolland on about Batman Killing Joke, and those first panels in Killing Joke, it's puddles, it's rain coming down and raindrops. He said he never used white media. He just used black and drew around. Did you use white on this, or did you just draw around?
I drew around it. Yeah.
Amazing.
Because I am not very. I don't think I have a lot of elegance, and just a real struggle for me to. I think my inking and stuff is all very unsophisticated. But I can turn back. The one thing I really liked.
Yes, please.
Was that last panel, because I just got to draw things. I like drawing real things. I got there's candy bars and keys and all that kind of junk, and those were always a relief for me to draw, because drawing that other stuff like with backgrounds and things, it's like, God, it's so hard. Mm-hmm. Even at night, to this day, I felt really bad because when those cars crash, and that I couldn't do that now. I'd have to have a background in there.
It is worth noting, too, that the Butterfinger parody is Buttfinger.
Mm.
I'm glad you noticed. Now, this is the first, I remember getting this issue, and I hadn't seen any of it, and she just really kind of dialed it in. And I made her do this one over because it was just almost like one color.
Mm.
Like, I draw these cars, and you got to put some and goofy nuclear. Because I always had things in my head of like, oh yeah, there's that buzz. I don't know what it was. There wasn't gas. They have like little nuclear engines. Of course, my great knowledge of science, if they hit anything, they would explode like an atom bomb.
So how many people going through their windshields, as they're wrecking in? Jeez.
And I did it once, and I thought, well, it can't just happen once. Mm-mm. That's the thing. If you start something, then you gotta keep going with it. Otherwise, it looks lazy.
This is another Will Elder-esque moments, as you like follow various explosions as like people are blown out of their cars sideways with the fire pushing them out. Ed, you're pointing at fish dicks.
Yes, which is a joke that gets stolen by the South Park guys 15 years later. So Uncle Geof May's a pioneer.
Yes, cutting edge humor.
Fish, pigs, cats.
I think at some point there's like a dead cow along the side of the road. I think one of those prior pages. And then once again, a bunch of cars blew up there, and he's like riding it on the top of it's so stupid. And this page, especially the one on the right, I'd had a root canal done in France, and they didn't do it properly. And I had it's like that. Have you seen those cartoons where somebody has a toothache and there's like the gremlin inside the mouth hitting you?
Right.
And that's what it was like. I could not. It was a weekend. And I couldn't find a dentist. I just had to wait till Monday. And so I'm up all night. I'm doing these pages when I'm up all night because I couldn't sleep because it hurt so bad.
I often reflect that and talk about that on the channel. Where like looking at old pages, it really can be like your own personal scrapbook. Nobody knows, but like you can look at these pages and remember where you were in your life, what sort of momentous things happen. Sometimes good, sometimes bad.
Yeah,
but it is interesting how comics work that way for the person who made the comics, for sure. Would you use with this is like 3-point perspective. Here's a vanishing point way up high, and then the proper vanishing points down below. Would you use the apparatus that your dad created for you to get those perspective lines correct?
I had those little wings on the side of my table. That's why I was doing each drawing on a separate sheet of paper, because I was, I wasn't sure if I would maneuvering that large, because these things were very large. I don't draw that large anymore.
This does not have to be shown on the channel or anything, but if you ever come across any photos of you and these wings, like, I'm just, in my mind it looks like one thing, but like I want to see you draw using that tool to do your work. I want to see what that looks like, and I just wonder if there's a photo of something like that.
No, I've never. I mean, I did a thing, and I was supposed to do a GoPro thing, that like a camera, and I set it up wrong, and all you ever see is the top of my head. I didn't want to do it anyway, because I thought, well, then you should pay me. If you're gonna like film me, I should get paid extra.
Yeah.
It's a great 2-page spread here.
Absolutely. The pose of the old lady, man, is something that I always love. Like, just the cock of that head, looking behind the gun, getting close to that shoulder. It's just really solid.
Just like the vending machine in the back.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was in the originally, when Frank, I'm sure I've told you this before, originally, that was going to be a guy. He was going to be kind of like this young guy, this really hip guy. And because it's the old, she's like the new model and he's the old model. It's like the young gunslinger against the old gunslinger. And I thought, well, what if the young gun looks like an old person? So, and a lady on top of it. I thought it was really funny. And at that time, there was all these like Elizabeth Taylor, try these, Black Diamond, my perfume.
Absolutely, I remember those commercials.
And I was like, I'm going to make her kind of give it a kind of a Elizabeth Taylor vibe. And I think the T-shirt, the sweatshirt, I think it says Godzilla.
Ah, that's cool.
Because I know later on, he's wearing a sweatshirt and it says King Kong.
That's awesome. That's awesome little subtext stuff.
Here's a lazy page. God damn. So put some fucking backgrounds in there.
Nobody's ever going to complain that you skip out on backgrounds ever. It could never happen.
Makes me cringe.
Good stuff with Nixon's body language as he's like just twisting and being broken into pieces.
Totally.
Torn apart. This is another one of those spreads where it was like, man, I spent a lot of time trying to study every single figure on this page.
This is the one that makes me want that big damn hard boiled real bad.
Yes.
Well, like I say, I'll bring each one. I've got maybe 10 or 12 of them.
Now you're going to get hit up on the DMs and Facebook a whole bunch right now, man.
It's very true.
Was Pulp Fiction out? I see we got like a kind of a GIMP bondage.
Yeah, I was, because I lived in Hollywood and I could see stuff in Hollywood Boulevard.
Yeah, I bet. But just like so many, just everybody has their own fashions and designs.
I lived in Silver Lake, and I lived near a place that was in Silver Lake at the time, it still is, I think, was a gay neighborhood at the time. In fact, it was one that when the whole AIDS epidemic broke out, like 2 guys were just coming out of one of these clubs and they got beat to death. Just guys pulled up in a truck, jumped out, and one of them got away, and the other guys, they beat him to death with a fucking baseball bat.
Ouch.
Wow.
But I was about there. One thing that bothers me about this drawing is like that car's too small.
Which car? This one?
Yeah, that tank thing.
This thing?
Small. Well, that other
was perfect.
Small. But I already drawn. I was like, I can't.
It does not register like that at all. It's like it's a 2-person thing. Like if you intended it to be like a 8-person thing, sure. But if anybody asks, 2 people fit in that. That's it.
Emergency donut on their on the screen on there.
In terms of,
it's right here.
The police. Yeah,
I see.
The police. Yeah, they're delivering donuts. I think that's what they're delivering donuts to a precinct or something. There we go. Now this is where I kind of took off. I think No, this part is it's after this where I just sort of drew stuff that wasn't.
Yeah, I mean, you were not asked to do the domino thing with motorcycles. You chose to do that.
And that's from what's he in Pee Wee Herman?
Yeah, absolutely.
When he comes out and knocks the things over, I thought it was funny.
Back to the Japanese death matches.
Yes, the eye rake.
Maybe even Jerry Jarrett pulling that guy's eyeball out in the ring.
Look at those freckles, man.
Yeah, liver spots.
Old folk skin. It's really good.
I have a look at my hounds all the time. God, have I gotten those yet?
Yeah, what year does that stuff start happening?
Oh God, the hair in people's ears. You ever see it? I was like,
yeah, my dad's that guy.
I pulled a hair out of my ear the other day. That's one thing. That and the nasal hair. That thing.
Look at these people. This is Hollywood.
And that's like a Studebaker Commander car there, because I just love those cars, the police car.
Do you have a lot of reference for cars and things, Geoff?
I had like a tiny little like a die-cast car that I looked at. Yeah, I looked at those, especially for the undercarriage.
Yeah,
it's really hard. The brakes and the not the brakes so much, but the chassis stuff that.
I never got into model building, but I would always look at models, like whenever I'd go to, the hobby shop / comic shop, some of those early days, and just marvel at like how detailed that stuff was.
Yeah.
It appealed to a certain part of my brain.
right.
Not something I ever indulged, but I can see how somebody, especially drawing something like Hardboiled, how that would be appealing to have that level of detail in a model.
I was at I never told you this. I was at Warner Brothers working on the boarded version of Superman in like 2002 or something like that, and I just about finished, and they said, well, we want you to meet with I forget his name, Christopher Nolan. We'd like you to work on Batman. And so they arranged for me to go over to Christopher Nolan's house, and it was really neat because I go out there and he's out in his garage with his producing partner, and they're building that Batmobile with Tamiya model tank kits. And that is the car that's in the film. And it's so cool to see these guys out there, and they're gluing these pieces together, and they're pirating parts from this model and that model and putting that thing together.
That's so cool.
Yeah, that is really neat.
You always hear like that's how the Star Wars stuff was made, with like battleship pieces and things, man. Is this what the Hollywood buses looked like at the time when you were out there?
I don't know. I don't.
It just looks so real.
Yeah. This is my favorite thing in this comic. Is this is my gag. Is he wants to get his gun.
Yes.
And he looks over, and she's taking it apart. And I thought that was a really funny gag, and it kind of sad. He's like, oh man.
It's such a 3-panel comic strip.
Yeah.
On its own. Great sequence.
I'm breaking my arm, patting myself on the back. On this, there once again we go. On the right, I get to do my fist fight thing. Just a bunch of panels of guys, a sequential fight. I forgot about that.
Yeah, it's so good. You see full bodies almost the whole time, and
I figured they were small enough they didn't have to worry about the backgrounds.
Any referencing in something like that, Geoff? Are you looking at any busting out movie frames
Black
or
Belt magazine?
I may have had one of those Japanese books that you can get that had some like fight stuff.
That's what I was thinking, man. Those Black Belt magazines would have like the whole procedure.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to ask it again, just because, like, it would be astonishing to know. Like, would these little panels be a single piece of paper?
Yeah.
Imagine if this was the piece of Geof Darrow art that you owned.
I would love it. I would have it framed.
I have some of those.
So Geoff,
God, but when I went to ink it, that was the pain in the ass, because I go, I make sure that I got each one correct and fit on the page.
So would you do an initial kind of rough and have all the panels set up, and then you would do individual drawings?
Yeah, I thought. Yeah.
So you didn't like Like each of
I
these,
still got the sketchbook somewhere with all these things.
like each of these panels, if we looked at the pencils, are we losing a lot of drawing in the final version? You know what I'm saying? Like, did
No,
you
it's,
adhere to the
no,
border?
that's oh yeah, it was I had to
Okay,
because it had to fit on the page. But
so it's
yeah,
not
those things.
cropped. Okay,
No.
good. Because I mean, Jeff, I can't. I have to ask the question because I can't put that past you to like
Oh,
draw
no,
a whole
it's
city out here and be like, oh no, I
I
got to
mean,
crop it on
I've
this.
wanted. I mean, yeah. I mean, yeah, but no, I'm afraid I'm not quite that.
You talked about Bonnie and Clyde earlier, and like let's take a look at what we're looking at this right here. It's basically a Bonnie and Clyde shot.
Man, I never thought of that, and it really comes through here and in issue 1 when Nixon's getting just chewed up in the very beginning with the gunfire. Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of reference there. This is also
Great
a crazy
sequence.
design because you look in and you can see like her Terminator eye is exposed. It's little
And
nightmares.
that was the one thing that bothered when I was doing it was because I'm thinking Terminator had come out, and I think Terminator 2 had come out. I'm not quite sure, but I kept thinking, God, is this just another Terminator, ripoff? But there was something way back there. There was something back there. If you go back a few pages,
Yes, sir.
that piece with the car, keep going
Yeah.
further. Maybe it's this thing with the tie. Where is it? Yeah, where she's on it. I don't really. And then the Wachowskis kind of used it in the Matrix. That
Right.
page there, and like she reaches down and she's like holding onto him with the
Yeah.
tie. I thought that was a good gag.
Yeah.
It is. Great
hard.
physics on her being crouched like that, too.
Yeah. Using all torque
Mm-hmm.
to yank on that thing.
And this was like as I was doing it, I was thinking Buster Keaton there. Well, what the possibilities were? Well, she's hanging on the side. Then what does he do? And he uses the bus to try to scrape her off the side of the car.
Yeah, genius. And I mean, communicating this in comic books, no easy feat.
It's
Yeah,
a cool
that-
effect to do like the extreme perspective as she's like now being drugged behind and peeled off.
It just, I mean, I like that. I'm not saying I'm a genius or anything, but that sixth panel where I was so proud of myself. I go, how am I going to show that truck that she's going to get, scraped off the side? And I was so happy with that composition because you can't avoid it. You know that what's going to happen next.
Totally.
This is like Batman Year One, except we don't have Batman like getting her out of the way at the last second.
Right.
And then once again, I put the little "Give Me Liberty" thing on
Yes.
the side.
Right
I
here.
wanted to,
Product placement.
Join PAX.
yeah.
One of the things that I thought was really funny is this is another one of those great, like these, they're almost comic strips within a bigger work, but her getting punched and the eyes coming out. Because it's a cartoon gag, the eyeballs popping out, except your interpretation is such a different visual than that classic cartoon trope.
Is this a toaster or?
Now, once again, it's a kind of radio. Yeah.
Okay.
And I put the dinosaur in there. I kept telling Frank, we gotta have a dinosaur in this comic. So that's why I like that RoboCop, the first movie. I go, no, you just have all this great action. You got a robot. You got all this action going on. There's dinosaurs. And at one point, there's that commercial for some new kind of car, and there's a dinosaur. And I go, this movie has everything I like.
And Geof Darrow taking it easy, doing 1 point perspective this time, man.
Yeah, I bet people say a lot of call him lazy for that 1 point perspective.
Jeff, the design work. I mean, it's. I asked Brian Ballin this question last week when we were looking at Judge Dredd stuff because he has to design all kinds of new crazy vehicles and stuff. Like, do you do any sketchbook work to kind of come up with this, or it's just done on the page?
I've done it on the page because I wanted to get things done, and I thought, well, I can do it in a sketchbook and just do it on the actual
Unbelievable.
page.
We talk to unicorns on this channel.
We sure do. Ed the Happy Clown making a little appearance here in a sign. Chester Brown's Ed the Happy Clown, and then I love this one. Sergeant Cock, I'm easy.
Well, yeah, there's also a reference in there. Oh, yeah. See that thing that says black box?
Yeah.
I don't know if I should tell you this story.
All right, let's hear it. Let's pot up the audio.
Well, well, I'm going to say, I don't know if I should tell you the story.
Well, listen, man, no pressure.
Oh
But
no,
you,
no. I mean, it's a funny because I mean, it's. I think it's blanked out. Doesn't it? Does it? Is there something to say on the side of it? Is it? Is there a name? Is that
Dave, or
okay?
is it? Yeah, Dave's.
Dave S.
Yes. Do you know who that is?
Dave Stevens' Black Box. Okay, I okay, I see where this is going.
Yeah.
Because it's
It was
even
reference.
because looking at it, it's
I
actually
can put
his
it this way.
signature.
It
It
was a
is.
reference. Yes, it was a reference to Dave's reference file. We called it the black box, and it was a thing where Dave. I mean, Davis. I mean, everybody knew he was quite, he liked the ladies. And,
And he's a handsome ass dude, man. Like,
yeah, I
he's gonna
mean,
get chicks.
he was.
When he had
I
that
mean,
Van Dyke mustache and shit like that, like that dude,
yeah.
he's
Well,
gonna get some puss.
and he, he. Sometimes he's prettier than the girls that he went out with. He he had that, and he kept certain things in that, and the whole thing was if anything ever happened to him, a mutual friend knew where this thing was just to go to the house and get rid of it.
Good move.
That's funny.
Good move.
That was the thing. That was the only thing. I think I've seen it before. Like when I was younger, and I was thinking, God, if something was happening to me, they'd find my porn collection. I'm really gonna be.
Yeah, yeah, it's a good move. Set that
If
up.
I had one, I'm not saying I did.
Yeah, sure. You know, spouses and things can be listening. You never know.
No, my wife. God, my wife doesn't care.
You know what's probably bad is like the baby boomers generation ages out, and it's the kids that end up cleaning out the parents'
Oh,
stashes.
Yeah, you don't want to know about that shit.
No.
You don't want to see
no.
no gimmicks and,
Yeah,
and
I didn't want to know. I know my parents had to do it at least 3 times, but that's as far as I want.
I have a sister who's 18 years younger, man. So it's crazy hearing my parents fucking when I was 18.
Well, Dave, I mean, he did this really beautiful drawing of the Rocketeer, and he's carrying Betty Page over his shoulder, and her butt almost looks like a heart. And he said he went home once, and his sister was wearing that T-shirt, and he felt so ashamed because, gosh, you shouldn't be wearing that. I felt bad when you drawn it. There you go.
Now we got this supermarket shot, man, with nuclear apples and
I was gonna say, like, that's some of the funnest stuff is seeing like the Frankenfood kind of. It's the little details, but it's part of what makes the world. It's the texture. Alan Moore calls it. Like making this world so rich. But yeah, it's a different part of your imagination here. Now you're making the hard-boiled version of the supermarket.
Yeah, and we're talking about Burbank. We're in California, like. You know, man, that the bougie California people ain't gonna be eating this mushroom.
No.
Well, see, I'm thinking that this because I was thinking of Walmart where everything you can buy things in maybe not Walmart, but what are those stores you can buy like 100 packages of toilet paper at once?
Yeah, Costco.
Yeah.
Well, in this case, it'd be like get these giant sodas and Frank, we really like that stuff because I put those giant soda things and I think there's something in there. At the time, there was a boxer named Duran.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There was also a group called Duran, and I think it was somebody wearing it says Duran versus Duran.
Yeah.
Boxing reference. And I was contacted by the band because they wanted to know if they could use it because they thought that I was a fan. I go, just kill it.
That's funny. Robot cashiers. I love the giant. There's a Pepto-Bismol in that huge family size,
That dude has some gastrointestinal issues, man.
Makes sense.
One of the
At
things.
the time, that's when they first started putting TV. It really bugged me that you go to the grocery store and you're standing in line and they'd have that TV set there with commercials. It's like, come on, give me a break, man. I'm already in here. You got my money. I'm not going to go back and buy this crap that you're advertising on your goddamn TV. I don't know if do they still have them or do they finally get rid of them?
You know what they have here now, man, is fucking TV when you're pumping gas.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They have those, yeah. But back then it was like they'd have a screen at the, the fish sticks are now available in family size.
This kind of humor, right, with these big foods and all that kind of stuff. When it would be done in comics prior to this, it would be Little Lulu or something like that. It would be some kind of silly thing. You would never have like such realistic anatomy. Maybe the closest you would have would be Wally Wood things or Will Elder, but like you just wouldn't see this kind of exploration in comics whatsoever.
Jeff, do you think about that as like like there are Mad Magazine elements that you're bringing into this book. Is that something you were conscious of?
Not really. It was just I thought this thing was just so. I was just trying to make things interesting for myself.
Yeah.
Make it kind of goofy, and I mean, it's. I mean, I'm not, maybe it sounds pretentious. It was my commentary on what was going around on that at that time. Just once again, bigger is better, or more is best, and it doesn't matter how good it tastes as long as there's a lot of it.
This is, I think the date on the indicia is like 1990. So I assume you're drawing this in the late 80s, very early part of the year 1990. And it's kind of neat to think about it then too, because like we grew up as, children of the 80s. The 80s were such a, there's a caricature version of the 80s that I feel like we kind of grew up, in that aftermath of like the excess of the 80s, the plasticity of the 80s, like all these stereotypes. And it feels like you can see that if you know the context, you can see some of that reaction in these pages.
I
like the robot girl, because the robot girl that's actually my wife, and I kind of made her kind of an Astro Boy. I gave her that her headpiece is kind of a car, which I thought was funny.
The eyeballs feel manga-ish.
Yeah, because I wanted it to be like Astro Boyish. And
yeah, it's so good because it's that precursor, like with Big Eye and Rusty. Like Rusty feels the Astro Boy part of the energy.
Yeah.
And this Doctor's not based on anybody?
No, just kind of a dweeby. That's one of those panels. It was like, oh God, I can do this in a few hours. Thank God. I feel like I accomplished something. Even this one here, I love this because I got to repeat I think I just like, I drew it. I inked it 6 times, but it's the same piece of art, I think.
We'll repeat this conversation in issue 3 when we go to the junkyard scene and talk about those splashes. But so the grates on the ground here, would you eyeball that, or would you put a ruler down and measure out millimeters and things?
Yeah, no, I probably at that time I probably did, because I was because I was trying to learn so much, and the best way to learn is to just bite the bullet and do it. And I would do that thing where where you how you draw an X through a square to find the center. You can do that in perspective.
Right.
Making sense.
Yeah.
I think I probably did that with most of these. But,
heck of a money shot right there.
I had fun drawing that one on the. And the most mature drawing in this entire book to me is the one on the right, because I actually have negative space. And yeah, those. Yeah, I don't know if I can't remember if I put those shadows in there or if he did. I can't remember.
If you would have put them in there, they would have been in pencil or something.
Yeah, they would have been pencil and ink probably.
Yeah, because it's very complex. It looks like Geof Darrow drawing.
Yeah, I probably drew them out. But I enjoyed drawing the one on the left there, because once again I get to draw a pair of scissors.
Yeah.
And I don't have to use any imagination because they just actually exist.
So before we knew you, and sort of how we got to know you was we did videos on Hardboiled, and a panel like this, I remember saying because we never spoke before, I was like, I think Geof Darrow, man, he's pulling in a different set of tools. I think he has a photographic memory. I think he sees stuff and just knows how it's built, or he has kind of a sort of reference library that we just don't know about, because it's dude, that's the exact sink stopper that every tub had in the 1980s and before.
That's my Sears catalog.
Yeah,
my Sears catalog and my I have the book here. I'd have to walk away to show it. But
yeah, that's fair.
It's a thing if you look up police car, they would have a picture of a police car, police belt, and have a picture of a police belt, so I had kind of a reference to know what was on a police belt. And I love the letters. I still have some of the letters.
Yeah. We'll be talking about at least one letter in issue 3, right, Jimmy?
Yes.
But that thing, that last panel, that was the cover for the French edition.
I see. Yeah, and once again, this is your lettering, correct?
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, it's a fantastic skill that you have that nobody talks about. It doesn't show up in reviews of Shaolin Cowboy or anything like that, but like there's amazing lettering that you do in perspective.
Well,
The kerning is correct.
if it isn't, then it looks wrong. I
Yeah.
mean, to me, it can look really bad. And there's me on the cover. That's my head when I had hair.
Yes.
Me looking in a mirror, and that's Frank's little revenge on me because I've told you this. I didn't get the joke. I didn't know. I just thought it was like he's late for an appointment, but it was Frank. It was a year. It was a year between issue 2 and issue 3, and that drawing is owned by Sam Raimi. Sam Raimi, and
Nice.
there's my dog.
Got some voluminous letters, man. So they had to do like a 3-point font.
There's one of that one where the guy's accusing me that I'm saying I'm drawing with my penis. That was my favorite one.
You gave away it says, a piece of original art to the writer of your favorite letter. Do you remember what the art was?
It was just a drawing of of Nixon, and I don't know. I don't know that he ever claimed it, or because he didn't send an address. I'm trying to remember if he actually did send in the. Some days it would just send in a letter, and then they wouldn't have their address.
Would do you recall that favorite letter? Like some of the things that the guy said?
It was probably someone that didn't like it.
Yeah.
I don't want to give a letter to someone who's like, those. I think you're the greatest guy that ever lived on the earth, and if Jesus came back, he'd be your friend, and blah 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 blah. That kind of stuff. I remember the guys are like, why do you have to draw this disgusting stuff? Because they're going to get the drawing and get really ticked off and
yeah, exactly.
Tear it up and throw it away.
The only response to those kinds of letters is to be grosser the next time.
Yeah, because I mean, even in Shaolin, we have letters, and I never have gotten any letters like I got with this thing, where it's like, I don't know, I just always hoped that I'd get those kind of goofy, people annoyed by, why is it so late? What have you been doing? I invested in this series and you're so late. And
one person who did not get the drawing for best lettering is a friend of the show. Jimmy, you want to point that one out? Perhaps read the voluminous text of our dear friend.
I'll read that. Point to that one, Ed. And this is Ben Mara, and his letter looks like it might have been trimmed because there are some ellipses on it.
Yeah.
But he says, I have one question for Geof. Did he ever draw for cartoons?
I remember that letter, but I didn't, and I don't think I ever even. I used to see those magazines on the.
They still come out.
Yeah,
you'll still see it at like Walmart's and shit.
Alex Toth used to do stuff in them.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, there's a collection of his.
I know a guy that I went to art school with. He sold some cartoons to him because he was a really good cartoonist, and he did mostly motorcycles.
It's weird. There's that one guy who shows up everywhere in like weird offbeat publications. He's never published in comic books, but he does comics in so many of the most like offbeat weird magazines. His name is Jim Siergey or something, Siergey, and like he still shows up in that cartoons mag. There might be 2 or 3 different kinds.
Makes me curious to talk to him because that's a legacy. You know what I mean? Like it used to be like that's cartoonists who make a whole entire career living of like just selling this stuff because there were so many outlets.
Yeah.
And at this point, like there aren't many outlets, and there can't be too many guys that still have that Rolodex of like who's buying single cartoons of car.
Yeah, I remember seeing his work in this. Joe Bob Briggs, the TV, the horror host guy.
Drive-in guy.
Yeah, his name is John Bloom or Broom, and he was an editor of a kind of Christian parody magazine called the Wittenberg Door, and fucking Jim Siergey comics are in there. Like he did, like this
that
guy
whole
was just,
sentence I feel like could be an episode.
Yeah, that's my big regret is thanks to Harvey. It put me on Joe Bob Briggs' radar in like 2008, and I was like, we were really trying to figure out like what the fuck we could do together because I love that guy. I grew up with TNT
sure.
Monster Vision and stuff like that, but we just the economic thing happened and it just kind of fizzled out. And then he had that resurgence of his career because it turns out a lot of people miss him from TNT Monster Vision. He's on Shudder now. The Last Drive-In.
Well, yeah, and George R. Martin wrote a letter to, I think it's in issue 19 of the Fantastic Four. and it was printed, and that's considered his first published writing.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's amazing. Like the people who show up in those letters columns, and I still see, like, when you see a CG Seed Fantastic Four, it'll talk about the content, but if you look on the far right, it'll mention like Steve Gerber letter or this person's letter, that person's letter.
Or if you look at those Gold Key used to print like guys' artwork, they had a page of artwork, and you'd see like Wrightson or you'd see Cockrum, you see some of these guys with little drawings. Wow! And I wouldn't notice them at the time, but later on, because we had a bunch of them, my brothers would read when they were eating, and it kept them in a box. And I remember I'd look at them too as a breakfast in the morning, and I go, "Oh my God, Bernie Wrightson! Wow."
Yeah, 2000 AD would work that way also. Like the next generation of 2000 AD guys, all of them showed up in the pages of 2000 AD when they were kids. I still remember the Shaky Kane Judge Dredd drawing from an old Prague. Yeah. Here we are.
Yeah. The
junkyard scene, and
there's the bathroom. That bathroom, I think Frank put that in there for me just because he knew how scatological I was.
Right.
The best part, but it was like you got that cop from the first issue that's coming in, and he's like trying to zip a house.
That's right.
It took him an hour to get that gear off to use the bathroom.
Doesn't even look like he could fit through the door.
Right.
Yeah.
Anyway. Junkyard sequence.
Man, having talked to you, Geoff, about Rolf, it's hard for me not to see like a little reference there, a little Easter egg for the Corbin fan.
Every video is somebody's first video. So like this is Richard Corbin's Rolf, a separate video that we are doing on Cartoonist Kayfabe, or did, depending on when you see this. Another splash, you draw on everything you want to draw. I see audio cassette tape with the tape pulled out. Man, back in the day when we would be playing outside, you would sometimes see these audio tapes with the tape pulled out, just like on the side of people's houses and shit. Remember that?
Oh man, I had a Walkman as a little kid, and I had plenty of those tapes. And I'd try to roll them back in them with put a pencil through the hole.
Yeah, never. Yeah, it would curl up at some point. And, oh God, that was just. We go to take it out of the machine, and you pull it out, and the spaghetti's gone. Oh my God, my favorite. Favorite cassette is ruined. There you go.
So Geoff, tell us about constructing this series of images inside the junkyard. I know that all this art, this exists. So
I still have that.
These are all drawings, and it's the same sequence.
That's my animation background, because they call that a pull through, where they do a long background, and then they'd pull like a car through it, like they're just a drawing of a car, and they just move it incrementally, and it was. The car never changed in perspective, but it looked good enough to move across. And so I used that technique. But I drew that whole background was on a separate sheet of paper. Mm-hmm. And then the figures were on separate sheets of paper. And then when I inked them, I would just place them and move them along a little bit across that drawing.
Yeah. So to explain it to the people at home, like, notice this car here is moved over to the left a little bit. So Geoff had a master drawing so that he could keep all this stuff straight, and then he would re-ink it.
Yeah, because I was so anal. I mean, I could have, I suppose, just Xeroxed something, and
which is what many cartoonists probably would have done, man. And that's like remarkable thing with your work.
Too OCD, I think, for me. I have it, but maybe that's proof I do.
Readers pay attention to that sort of stuff, and they will mention that thing because they want you to bleed for their buying dollar. They want you to bleed on the page, man, and they will mention, like, I see these two little dots of ink right here. They're on this image also. You copied the background. You're a hack.
And it looks like John Workman now doing some of the sound effect lettering.
Oh yeah, he did most of that. Yeah, a lot of that lettering is him. I stopped at that point because
I love this moment of ripping off like the flesh to reveal the robot. We're just gone now. It's just robot on robot fighting.
Circling one another.
This is once again, when I was a kid growing up, they had a game, a toy you could buy called Rock'em Sock'em Robot.
Yeah, sure.
And one was the red bomber and one was the blue bomber. And I for some reason, we never got one, and I wanted it so bad. And so when I did this, I thought, I said, I told the colorist Claude, I said, he's going to be red and the girl's got to be blue because it has a payoff to the Rock'em Robots. Because the whole thing was you'd show these kids playing it. If you hit the robot right on the chin, its head would blow up, and the kid in the commercial would go, "You knocked my block off." So, if you go through here, you'll see. And this was really cool with Frank, because I mean, he was like, he's really uncomfortable with the sex here. The Nixon guy, he's just like, he still thinks he's human, but he's attracted to this robot. He has a similar head to the girl in the.
Geof, I do have to ask, just looking at behind where you're sitting, seeing a lot of figures, a lot of toys. Like, do you have or did you get Rock'em Sock'em robots?
I never did get one. No. I remember I got to play it once. We were at some kid's house, some cousin's house, and they had it. And I should have got one, because the whole idea of being able to just, gosh, a robot, you get to fight with it.
There was like an 80s, 90s version where they kind of updated the robots and made them look a little bit more gnarly. Same principles.
They're real blocky. They had like a square jaw. They're really pretty funny.
Yeah.
But there we go. There she's really.
Just incredible. Now, I haven't seen the...
He's got a clock in his forehead. I don't know why he did that. I thought it was funny. For some reason, under the skin, you'd have to have a clock.
Now, so much of this background really does get pushed back from the very, very dark colors in this version. And is that something that you're okay with? Like, did this get changed?
It printed too dark.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I digress so much, but I had I lived in a neighborhood, and it was a neighborhood that Sam Raimi lived in. I mean, not that I was, but it was in Silver Lake in Los Angeles, and it was in a Best Buy, not a Best Buy, but it was a Circuit City. With Circuit City, it was, they sold TVs and this and that. And they're kind of like Best Buy of the time. And I'm in there, and here comes in Sam Raimi with his producer Robert Tabbert, and he invited me to a party. Because they recognized me, and we talked, and I forget what we were talking about. Lost my train of thought. But he has he invited me to his house for this party with John Woo. This is where it comes, because he was going to start doing this movie called Hard Target, and so he said, "We need to come to the party." I go, "Wow!" Sam Raimi, Bruce Campbell shows up, and John Woo. Oh my God. And so I'm there, and John Woo asked me, and he had just finished a film called Hardboiled. And he had seen the comic book, and he said, "Did you mean it to print that dark?" And I was like,
wow.
I mean, it's one thing people notice it, but when fucking John Woo noticed it. When they reprinted it, they printed it lighter, but
yeah.
And then also at that party, it was because I had that cover with the head.
Yeah.
And I gave that part to Sam, and I gave the back cover to his producer, Rob Tabbert. And then he later put that in his movie, The Quick and the Dead.
Yeah, the shot happens in the movie.
Yeah. So here's the big payoff for Frank with my bulldog. See, you knocked the block off the robot. Ow. There you go. I got the Rock'em Sock'em robots thing out of my system.
Beautiful. Great camera angle on that bulldog. Makes me think of the Steve Scrose commentary in the lead poisoning Geof Darrow art book.
And there's you see, I think Marge Simpson's in there. She's carrying a.
Oh, there she is, man.
There's a couple Marge Simpsons. It looks like.
Yeah.
This is the one, and later on there's another Simpsons episode, and this was stop me with this story.
No.
I was at San Diego, and this guy comes up to me and he says, "Do you like The Simpsons?" I said, "Yeah, I love The Simpsons." I said, "Well, why do you ask?" He goes, "Well, because Matt Groening, he likes your work and he'd like to come to talk to you, but he saw The Simpsons references in the comic and he thought maybe you didn't like him." And I said, "No, I put him in there because I like him so much." Because later on you'll see I put Bart Simpson on a crucifix.
Yeah, earlier I saw Lisa Simpson on shirts and stuff.
Yeah, well, and I thought at the time they had so much Simpson stuff. The one thing they hadn't done yet was Bart Simpson as Jesus, because they merchandised the hell out of that thing. So that was my joke. But I said no, I love it. So then Matt Groening came over to talk to me.
Geof, it's a character like this that makes me feel like it has to be somebody.
No, I was thinking of a kind of an Einstein kind of guy, I guess. Not really anybody. And that's actually based a little bit on the French subway system.
I see.
It's so easy to get lost in these kinds of crowd drawings.
This is the one. I think see, there's Bart Simpson on the cross there.
Okay, where is it?
It's on the page on the right, the first two panels.
Oh yeah, there he is, of course.
Yeah. I just like the idea of like him tearing that guy's arm off and killing him with his own arm.
Right.
And I really wanted to do, well, later on I'll explain it. As the lazy going chair, because when I was a kid, the first piece of furniture I ever bought was I was living in Chicago, and I finally got an apartment, and it was around Thanksgiving, and they have these chairs called Lazy Boys, really popular brand of leather chair and easy chair. And if you bought one, you got a free turkey. I bought one. It was like $150, which was a lot for me at that time. But I had a nice chair that I could watch TV. And sort of thing, you pull the lever on the side, and the bottom comes up like about as effective as the leg rest on a United Airlines flight. But that always stuck with me. So I thought, I put that thing on the lazy guy. Like he's so fat and he can't really move. So he has this machine.
Yeah, it's smart. Like, and it's also one of those pieces that made me, before I knew you, think about the potential Mad influence, because there was that great Wally Wood strip very early on where it's like the people of the future and they all have those like little tricycles or whatever, but they can't do anything for themselves, and that's like their downfall. Nixon on the subway.
Good looking subway inside and out. Some cool graffiti on the outside.
In the era where you cannot Google that, like what was your reference library like, Geof? Would you?
I probably went into the and that was tricky at the time because there were certain terrorist things going on in France. I probably took a picture of the interior of the subway and the interior of a car. And this is like that one on the right. I think these movie things.
Yeah.
Is there called Nazi Wilderness Family? Because there used to be these movies that would come out that were like Christian films. It would be like some family goes out west and they befriend a grizzly bear that grows up to be their best friend, and they have all these Christian values and all this shit. And I came up with this idea, and it's in there somewhere. But if like the Nazi Wilderness Family, they go west in search of people to put in death camps, and they're rewarded by the genocide of the Native Americans.
One of the pieces that is in here is certainly very rooted in the time period with which this book was released, man. Vanilla Dice Clay.
Yes.
Oh.
Hickory Dickory Dock.
Now this is where Frank stopped me. Because when this starts here, where you hear this crash, I was going to draw this whole fight. I had this thing all figured out with. It's going to start out with, I don't know, maybe one panel and then two panels, and there would be more and more panels, because my idea was that by the end of it, the panels got so small with so much going on in them that you would have a headache looking at it. So that at the end of it, you'd feel like he looked at the end of it. And Frank said, Geof, if you do that, it'll never, ever, ever get done. So the result is that double page spread. I never got to do that. There you go, that thing. That panel there on the right side. That's.
Let me ask you, like, do you agree with that assessment? He's from the outside looking in, like waiting for pages to come down. Do you think you could have done it?
I volunteered. The French were going to do about 10 years ago. They were going to do a re-release of it, and I volunteered. I said, I'll do that sequence. And I'll put it in there. And no, that's okay.
Why would they?
Yeah, it's a crime against comics.
And Mike Richardson, you watching or what, man?
Well, I don't know that I'd do it now.
Sure, yeah.
Back then, because you know, I kind of did it. I didn't do it this page. That was but the best I thought I could do. And that is actually inspired by Otomo. There's that Chinese Russia war comic that he did.
Yeah.
And there's a panel in there with a big fight, and that I was really inspired by that. I remember exactly where I was when I drew that.
It's interesting to hear that description of the extra pages, doing this battle in a different way, and then seeing like from this 2-page spread and when you turn the page, Ed, it's so effective what you ended up with, as opposed to that first idea or that other, an alternative way to get to this point. Like, it's pretty, everything you describe, I feel like we experience in these couple of pages.
Yeah, I just had wanted, because at the time, like I said, I really loved John Woo, and I still John Woo's films, and I wanted to do something like that. Although I did like the whole idea of the popping the ear off, because it is the last piece of flesh, I think, functional on his body. It's his last piece of humanity, what he thinks is humanity.
Geof, do you remember what the inspiration was to decide on magazine format as opposed to a comic book pamphlet size?
I think it was because I drew the size wrong. And it would have looked, and it was so complicated, or some of it anyway, it would have looked pretty. Although they're going to do that now, they're re-releasing it. It's going to be on one of those smaller, trade size things. I don't know what's going to be. I was really worried because I put this Johnny AC/DC thing on there.
Right.
And it was a, I don't know if you know it, that was a DC Comics character.
Oh no!
Look what's coming out this month, and then he would introduce me, and I got away with it. But then they put it in a game, and people were getting sued. And I thought they did a hard-boiled game, and I said you can't use that thing because you might get sued, because Warner's had bought DC, and they were kind of
right.
I got to draw my giant spark.
Yeah, man. And this shot too, like, it makes me think of like, you knew Peter Chung when you were in LA, and at the beginning of Aeon Flux, like, has this with the Venus flytrap eyebrow.
Yeah, I don't know that I don't know if I'd met him at that point. I don't think that's why I did it, because when did Aeon Flux?
I'm saying he might have done it seeing this.
Oh, maybe. Yeah, I love Peter's stuff. Now, once again, this thing was. I think that was going to be the last one, and I drew these last 2 pages in L.A., and I hate them because they were badly reproduced, and I think I was kind of burned out. I don't like these drawings.
It's a very bold line. Like, I wonder, did you draw this splash page smaller than most
I
of the
did.
others?
Yeah, that's exactly, you're right.
So it got blown up,
and that bugged me.
Yeah.
But I like the shot. And that house on the left there.
Yeah.
That's the house from Psycho.
Right.
I thought that was funny.
It is funny.
I think a lot of things are funny. I'm full of shit.
And look at this beautiful domestic couple. It does look like the dog is in heat.
The one last dog asshole shot.
That's a dog in heat, man. It has the pig snout growing. It's going to be ready to make a baby.
And that door has got a lot of security on it.
Yeah, I love that door.
That's a French door. It's kind of the old style French doors, times 100.
Amazing, man. I'm trying to look at this character here. Is that like a Tetsuo on that bowl?
It's quite possible. I can't make it out from.
Tweety bird underneath the dog, Bambi. Amazing. What a comic. And then, okay, so this lettering for the end part, it's very congruent with the title lettering. Did Frank Miller's brother do that piece, or that would just be
John Workman? What's that cow thing? What's that?
A Smoking Cow production.
Oh, I don't know why I put that in there.
Just having some fun.
Yeah.
March 1992 is when this one was released.
Yikes.
Amazing. Jim Rugg, did you ever think we'd be hanging out with Geof Darrow, going through one of the most important comic books of our childhood?
Man,
Nightmare.
full circle.
Nightmare.
Jeff.
I often tell the story, Jeff, and I'm sure I've told it to you half a dozen times. But I mean, this was one of my first trips to the comic book store that was like my first comic book store. I picked up Hardboiled #1. I was too young to drive. I'd got a ride with my parents, and I'm reading it in the back seat going home and just trying to make it make sense because I had never seen a comic book that looked anything like this. I was used to monthly comics, and I think about that all the time where it's like those are deadline comics.
Yeah.
There's a lot of ways to think of a monthly comic, but one of the things is they're drawn as fast as you can humanly draw them. And so like when I got hold of Hardboiled and I'm just staring at pages for hours, it was a different thing. It felt like a different medium.
Well, for me, like I said earlier, I just wanted I wanted to impress Frank, and I wanted to make him proud, because it meant a lot to me that because nobody knew who the hell I was. I mean, it was, it was very generous of him to work with me on this thing. As I say, he was very patient because I just wasn't very fast. I was thinking of something like, and I'm not saying that I achieved this, but David Stevens would always say that he wasn't going to do a lot of comics, but the ones that he did were going to be. He always asked me, "What do you want? What do you want, Jeff? What do you want out of comics?" I said, "I'd like some respect. I'd like to get respect." And I went to a Catholic school. It's so funny. I tell you this story because my daughter went to art school in Paris, a place called Art Deco, which is one of the most well-known art schools in France. And a friend of my wife's here has a friend that's like super rich, and she has 2 kids, and one is a successful businessman. He's a hedge fund manager in Canada and that. And her other son is he's just such a loser. And he went to a nowhere school. He went to this horrible school called the Art Deco, and he draws comic books. And he's such a failure. And it's like, I want to meet this woman. Like, there you go. Those are the kind of people that just look down on. So that's something I always find.
That's my kind of Goofus and Gallant.
Yeah.
Jeff,
I always wanted to be Goofus.
Of course, man. Like
I am Goofus.
Goofus has much more fun. Like ignorance is bliss, man. And the Goofuses of the world, the shameless people that don't think twice about asking for the shirt off your back and like question why you wouldn't give it to them. But they seem to also have a lot of advantages. Like people want to. What do they call it? The good guy discount, like, if you just ask, sometimes people will just give it to you. That was Goofus.
I went to this party that they had for my daughter when we were living in Chicago. It was the French school we had her enrolled in because French was her first language. And there are a lot of rich Americans that put their kids in there so they could say they went to a French school. And they had like a potluck for all the kids and their parents. And I went to one that was like, this super rich guy, an insurance guy. And he walks up to me. He kind of looks like one of the guys from the Rat Pack. He's got the sweater, the button sweater, and the sleeves rolled up to the elbow and kind of a slick back hair. And he started talking, "So, what do you do?" "What do you draw?" I said, "Do they pay you for that?" I said, "Yeah, they do." "Well, good for you. Good for you." And he pats me on the back and he walks off. And it's just like the best. It's so condescending. I'm like, yeah, good for me.
Doing the hip hop comic, I had a record exec, a very famous one, hit me up and wanted me to do some album cover for this one rapper, a modern day rapper. And I'm like, nah, I'm not doing no cover for that dude, man. Because like the shit, it's trash. And then like I know how hip hop works, and you get played out quick. So I was just kind of holding it. Like if I would do something for that dude, then the people that I really like would never want to collaborate because I'm played out. Like I'm this guy's thing, And I'm like, nah, I'm not doing that, man. He's like, but we pay this, and I'm like, that's all right, man. And he's like, but how does comics work? And I'm like, well, just get a royalty off the thing. It's no different than like a musical artist with the CD royalty and stuff like that. But then he knows how that part works for the musicians. He's like, well, how do you make any money then, man? Funny how that stuff works. Jeff, before we get out of here, can you please tell the people when they should expect the Shaolin Cowboy Cruel to Be Kin trade paperback to see the light of day in comic shops?
May 16th, provided that, like I guess everywhere, the shipping and such, but in theory, it's supposed to be out May 16th. At least that's what it says on Amazon. But don't go to your local comic store and pre-order it and ask them to get it. I think it's the best comic book that I've ever done.
And fantastic.
And I cannot wait to look through that comic book. With you, it would be ideal. It would be ideal to look through it with you. But Jimmy, you're just thinking off the top of the head, like, what if, before then, sometime, we crack open Big Eye and Rusty with Jeff joining us.
And if you ever want to do like a Von Baudet thing, count me in.
We definitely do, man. You know what? Getting that Cobalt 60, getting the old Yunk Waffles, hard to do. Like we just need the comics. Kayfabers, man. If you got doubles, P.O. Box 3071, Munhall, PA 15120, so that we could do the Von Baudet, Geof Darrow comics.
That'd be sweet.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorites, and that would have had more of a stylistic influence on me than probably before Mobius.
There's that one great piece. Did you ever send it to Jimmy, the guy on the motorcycle?
No, that's my Von Baudet. I use magic markers to color it like he did.
Gorgeous.
I saw him. I tell you this story. I saw him at the Phil Seuling's New York Comic Con, 1975, I think. Kirby was there. Steranko was there. Bernie Wrightson. I remember the elevator opened up. There's Bernie Wrightson, Jeff Jones, Louise Jones, and Von Baudet coming off the elevator. And I remember spinning in the lobby, watching Von Baudet draw. And to this day, it was like magic. It was like watching. It's just like, gosh, how's he doing that? And he was such a. He was wearing at the time like a caftan sort of thing, which. This is 1974, and I'm a kid from 5, and I'm a kid from Iowa. And he looked very, very, or you couldn't describe his gender. He had painted fingernails, which he didn't, at that time, he didn't see. And he was drawn, and then there's these little old ladies who are watching him and talking about how he was going to hell because he was probably a homosexual, and he was like, but they were actually pitying him. They felt bad for him.
That's how they do.
It's like, oh, man. But yeah,
because they're the ones that get to go to heaven, man.
Yeah. I think he died. He died like about 6 months after. This is the last time he performed his cartoon concert. I went to see that.
You can find. We have an embarrassment of riches this day and age, man. You can find the videos of some of those recorded performances on YouTube. They exist, and it is amazing. It's all the stuff you ever heard about with Mark Bode, talking about how his dad would perform the voices and shit. You get to hear it. How lucky are we?
Cheech Wizard sounded like W.C. Fields, as I recall. But yeah, it was such a magic story. Go sitting on a Jack Kirby, running into Jack Kirby outside the hotel, and he's talking to us. I was with some of the friends from art school, and he says, "What are you guys doing?" I'm going to come. Oh, come up to my room and show me what you're doing. Jim Kirby. And I was like, couldn't do it because I didn't want to bother him. But it was just, he was that sweet a guy.
Amazing. Yeah, and it's so cool that you got the
number, and it's like, wow. We asked him, why don't you come out with this? He goes, I'm too, it's for you young guys. And
I think Bob Beerbaum on Facebook, he put out talking about going to some old New York show, and Jerry Iger from the Eisner Iger Studios was there, and he had like some kind of carnival barker with him that said he had a stack that Beerbaum said was 5 feet high, and he said that they had a stack, the carnival barker, like, we have a stack of Matt Baker original art, $10 an inch, and he said he bought 2 feet. He bought 2 feet of Matt Baker artwork, 24 inches. Said it took a year to go through it all, and he pulled out maybe 6-7 complete stories out of there in the whole mix of all that shit.
That's incredible.
As I bought my first original art, I bought a page of Conan, drawn by Gil Kane and inked by I think either Ralph Reese, I think it might have been Ralph Reese, and a penciled drawing of the Forever People by Jack Kirby.
Do you remember the prices that you paid at that time?
Yeah.
Let's hear it.
$45 for the Conan, and I think the Kirby was 50 or 60.
Amazing.
Yeah,
that was a lot of money for me.
Oh, sure, that's a lot. We could put that in the inflation calculator, and that'll be hundreds of dollars.
I gave that drawing to Frank. Frank has the Kirby. I gave it to him for his 40th birthday.
What's up with the most generous people on earth as our guests here, giving Kirby artwork to each other, passing Kirby artwork around?
It kills me because I haven't seen it, and they did Sci-Fi Network did they toured Frank's studio, and they go, "Oh my gosh, what is this? This should be in a museum." "Oh, that's a drawing I got from Jack Kirby," as I recall. And I'm like, "That's the drawing I gave."
Did you get the Gil Kane piece from Gil Kane?
No, but because he wouldn't even. I run into him at the show, and I go, "Oh, Mr. Kane, I'm a really big fan." And he goes, "Well, my boy, I just happened to hit a guy with him that had a stack of Kane originals, and they were like $50." And I'm like, "Oh my God, if I don't buy something from him, he's gonna think I'm just bullshitting him," you know. And I'm looking through these things, and I'm like, "Oh God, they're you know." And I wasn't sure if I had the money, and they weren't. You know, I was such a big Conan fan at the time. I was like, there wasn't any of that. And I was with this friend of mine, another artist named Gary Gianni, and Gary goes, "Oh, Mr. King, I'm a really big fan." He goes, "Oh, really, my boy? Well, I have this artwork," and he pulls the pile away from me and shows it to Gary, and I bolt. That's my doubt. And Gary actually did buy the page from him, but then I found another guy that had it. I think it was $35. That's what I paid for it. I found it for it was like $15 cheaper, which doesn't seem like much, but at the time, $15.
Oh, that's plenty.
Yeah, that's an inch and a half of Matt Baker's if you'd have found the right guy.
Well, I heard they used to do that with Kirby. That's what I don't know. I won't mention the guy's name. That he was buying the stuff by the pound, and it was stuff that possibly had been taken.
The stories of original art from those early days of like buying and selling original art, like those stories are. I mean, they're criminal in some cases now.
Yeah, there are artists I won't mention that supposedly you probably know what I'm talking about that would go in, and when they go into the Marvel offices, they just.
It's well on the record. I mean, we asked Chaikin, who was Gil Kane's assistant, like, there was Gil Kane pinching stuff, and Howard Chaikin, minced no words, said Gil was a thief. He said the word thief. Gil was a thief. He took it. He took the stuff.
He supposedly would go into Marvel, and he would never leave without taking a stack of that paper that they gave. And supposedly he had like you could build a room with, 6-foot high pile of that paper. And I think it was just like a mental thing. He couldn't leave without taking something.
There's probably some element of that, like Depression era shit, man, where just like to have some resources, really, like squirrel some stuff away.
I would read about those old time cartoonists, and they would talk about drawing on the backs of like calendars and things like that. You know, like literally finding scrap paper to draw on was a thing for some of that.
There's some of those guys that would do illustrations for like those science fiction digest magazines, which Wally Wood did, and guys like really good artists like Ed Cartier, and they used them to like insulate their walls.
Yeah,
just ripped them out and put the paper in it because it didn't mean anything to them. No one ever thought that stuff would be worth anything. I remember when back then you'd go and you'd see stacks of originals that. Like $10, you could get a page of World's Finest or all that stuff. In our lifetime, like, see, we've always heard those kinds of stories and saw the prices in old books, and we would lament like, oh, if I was there. But like the versions that we have of like where we were and what we saw with our own eyes, $60 From Hell pages, Eddie Campbell, stacks like this at Chris Starros' table. But like at the time, I'm like 15, 16. Like that might as well have been $600.
Right.
Like I just didn't have that. I had to pay $20 to just get in here. And that's a big regret.
I was at a gentleman's house, a big art collector. And he's the only guy I knew that he had bought a lot of the Wally Wood illustrations from Galaxy and What If magazine. And he had think, one or two Frazettas, and I'm in there sitting there with him, and his phone rings, and he says, "Geof, someone they have a Frank Frazetta, one of the Princess of Mars, or one of those paintings for sale, and it's $2,000." Now that was not a lot. That was a lot of money, but it wasn't that much for a Frank Frazetta painting. This was like 1976 or 77. Still, I was like, that's a bargain, but I didn't have $2,000.
Yeah.
That thing now would be worth.
It could be $1 million.
$500,000. Yeah.
It could be like he's been selling for $1 million the past couple of years.
It's just, I mean, even I remember going to the not Heritage, but the Illustrators, Society of Illustrators, and they sell artwork there. They used to, and they had I thought about buying it. It was $10,000. It was an illustration of Tintin. It was something for advertising, but it was, I mean, it's pure. I doubt that it was Hergé that drew it.
Yeah, it's a studio.
It was because I knew the guy, met the guy, Jacques Martin, that did a lot of that stuff, that actually worked on a lot of the last albums. But still, I was like, God, it was so beautiful. It was in color. I don't know, it was somebody with a car and a refrigerator and all this stuff, and Tintin and Captain Haddock. But
wow,
Geof, we got to resume this conversation at a later date. Thank you so much for joining us to go through Hardboiled. Look at that little Aryan motherfucker, man.
Beanie and Cecil.
Yeah. Let's reconvene at a later date. Let's talk Big Guy Rusty. Let's talk Shaolin Cowboy, Cruel to Be Kin. Grab it at your local comic shop. Put in that pre-order, or get it at your easiest convenience.
And when does the Street Angel Poverty? Is it
Princess of Poverty?
When does that come out?
I don't have a street date for that yet, but I think it's probably in May. It was going to be in April, but some contract stuff delayed its release a little bit, so I just got that resolved.
So we're talking about competing books then? You guys are at war? Are we going to take a look? Are we going to take a look at the Karamicon?
Could be a book tour. How about that? But yeah, it should be out later this spring.
I like that train of thought, man. It's not about competition. It's about cooperation.
That's right.
And this is a fun co-op today. Uncle Geof, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much, Geof.
Thanks so much.